The altar was stained with the blood of girls who came before her. Wren could see it in the moonlight, dark patches soaked into the ancient stone, layer upon layer of sacrifice stretching back centuries. She wondered how many had stood where she stood now, bound in white silk and crowned with winter roses, waiting for the blade that would spill their life across the altar and appease the old gods. She wondered if any of them had been as terrified as she was. The high priest circled her slowly, his black robes trailing across the frozen ground. He was ancient, his face a map of wrinkles and cruelty, his eyes as cold as the winter moon hanging overhead. In his hands, he held the ceremonial dagger, its silver blade etched with runes that seemed to pulse with hungry light. "The moon rite requires purity," he intoned, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "It requires sacrifice. It requires blood." The villagers watched in silence, their faces pale and drawn in the flickering torchlight. Some looked away when Wren's eyes found them. Others stared with something that might have been pity or relief, that it was not their daughter on the altar tonight. Wren's mother was not among them. She had died 3 winters past, leaving Wren alone in a world that had never wanted her. An orphan with no family to protect her, no dowry to secure a husband, no value to anyone except as an offering to gods who probably did not exist. The village council had chosen her unanimously. Of course they had. She was the perfect sacrifice. No one would mourn her. No one would miss her. No one would demand answers when she disappeared. "Do you accept your fate?" The high priest stopped before her, raising the dagger until its point hovered inches from her throat. "Do you give yourself willingly to the moon, that our village might prosper for another year?" Wren's throat tightened. The words she was supposed to speak lodged behind her teeth, refusing to come out. She was supposed to say yes. She was supposed to bow her head and accept her death with grace and dignity. That was what the others had done. That was what was expected. But she did not want to die. "I dash," she began. The howl shattered the night. It came from the forest beyond the ritual grounds, a sound so deep and powerful it seemed to shake the very earth beneath their feet. The villagers cried out in fear, stumbling backward, their torches wavering. The high priest spun toward the tree line, the dagger trembling in his grip. "What is this?" he demanded. "Who dares interrupt the sacred rite?" The wolves emerged from the darkness like ghosts made flesh. There were dozens of them, massive creatures with fur in shades of silver and black and deep russet brown. They prowled out of the trees and encircled the ritual grounds, their eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Their lips peeled back to reveal fangs as long as Wren's fingers. The villagers screamed and fled, abandoning their torches, trampling each other in their desperation to escape. Only Wren remained still. She could not run even if she wanted to. The silk bindings held her fast to the altar, helpless and exposed. The largest wolf stepped forward. He was magnificent and terrifying, a beast of pure midnight black, with eyes that burned like molten gold. He moved with the easy grace of a predator who had never known fear, and the other wolves parted before him like water before a ship's prow. When he reached the edge of the altar, he stopped and lifted his massive head to look at her. Something passed between them, a spark, a recognition, a pull so strong Wren felt it in her very bones. Then the wolf began to shift. Fur melted into skin, bones cracked and reformed. In moments, a man stood where the beast had been, tall and broad-shouldered, with hair as black as his wolf and eyes that still glowed with that same golden fire. He was naked, unashamed, his body carved with muscle and marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. He was the most beautiful thing Wren had ever seen. "This rite is finished," he said, his voice low and commanding. He did not shout, but somehow his words carried across the entire clearing. "There will be no more sacrifices, not tonight, not ever again." The high priest drew himself up, his face purple with outrage. "You have no authority here. This is sacred ground. These are sacred traditions. Who do you think you are?" The man turned to face the priest, and something cold and deadly flickered in his golden eyes. "I am Theron Blackwood," he said quietly, "Alpha King of the Northern Realm, and the woman you were about to murder is my mate." The silence that followed was deafening. Wren stared at the man who had just claimed her, her mind struggling to process his words. Mate. The Alpha King. Her, a worthless orphan about to have her throat slit on a blood-soaked altar. None of it made sense. The high priest recovered first, his face twisting with fury. "This is blasphemy. The moon rite has been performed for 500 years. It cannot simply be stopped because some wolf king decides he wants our sacrifice for himself. I am not taking her for myself." Theron's voice was deadly calm. "I am saving her from murder dressed up as religion." He turned his golden eyes to Wren, and something in his expression softened. "Cut her bonds." One of his wolves shifted into human form and approached the altar with a knife. Wren flinched as the blade came near, but the woman merely sliced through the silk bindings with quick, efficient strokes. The moment Wren was free, her legs gave out beneath her. Theron caught her before she hit the ground. His arms were warm and impossibly strong, wrapping around her like a shield against the world. She should have fought him. She should have demanded answers, explanations, some proof that he was not simply trading one death for another. But her body had other ideas. It melted into his embrace as if it had been waiting for him her entire life. "I have you," he murmured against her hair. "You are safe now." "I do not understand." Her voice came out thin and shaky. "I am no one. How can I be your mate?" "The bond does not care about status or wealth." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that stole her breath. "It cares only about souls, and my soul recognized yours the moment I crossed into this territory." The high priest stepped forward, his ceremonial dagger still clutched in his trembling fist. "You cannot do this. If the sacrifice is not completed, the gods will punish us. Our crops will fail. Our children will sicken. The village will be destroyed." "Your gods are lies." Theron did not even look at him. "Invented by men like you to control the frightened and the desperate. There is no power in innocent blood except the power you give it." He finally turned, and the cold fury in his expression made the priest stumble backward. "How many girls have you killed in the name of these lies? How many families have you torn apart?" "It is tradition. It is murder." Theron's voice dropped to a growl that resonated with Alpha Command. "And it ends tonight. If I ever hear of another village in my realm practicing such barbarism, I will tear it to the ground myself." He swept Wren into his arms and carried her away from the altar, away from the blood and the torches, and the priest still sputtering his protests. His wolves fell into formation around them, a living wall of fur and muscle that no one dared challenge. They traveled through the night. Wren drifted in and out of consciousness, her body finally surrendering to the shock and exhaustion she had been holding at bay. She was aware of warmth surrounding her, of strong arms that never faltered, of a heartbeat steady and sure beneath her cheek. Every time she stirred, Theron's voice murmured reassurances she could not quite hear but somehow understood. When she woke properly, she was in a bed. Not the thin straw pallet she had slept on her entire life, but an actual bed with a feather mattress and silk sheets and blankets heavy with warmth. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, and a fire crackled in a hearth large enough to stand in. She sat up slowly, her head spinning, and found Theron sitting in a chair beside her. He looked different in the daylight, still impossibly handsome, still radiating power and authority, but somehow softer, more human. His golden eyes watched her with concern rather than command. "How do you feel?" he asked. Confused. Wren pulled the blankets up to her chin, suddenly aware that she was still wearing the sacrificial gown. Where am I? My castle. 3 days' ride from your village. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I wanted to put as much distance between you and that place as possible. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why do you care what happens to me? You do not know me. You have never even seen me before last night. Something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps, or regret. I have been searching for you for 10 years, he said quietly. My wolf has known you were out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Every full moon he would howl for you, calling across the distance, hoping you would answer. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against her skin. Last night, you finally did. Wren stared at him, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had spent her entire life being told she was worthless, and now a king was telling her she was the one thing he had been searching for all along. The days that followed were a study in contradictions. Wren was given rooms fit for a queen, with servants who bowed when she passed, and closets filled with gowns more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. She was fed until her shrunken stomach ached, bathed in waters scented with oils that cost more than her village earned in a year, and treated with a deference that made her skin crawl. She did not know how to be cared for. She did not know how to accept kindness without waiting for the price. Theron seemed to understand this without being told. He did not push her. He did not demand anything. He simply appeared each evening at her door and asked if she would walk with him through the castle gardens, or share a meal with him in his private dining room, or sit with him by the fire while he worked through the endless paperwork of ruling a kingdom. He gave her space when she needed it and company when she craved it, reading her moods with an accuracy that should have been unsettling but instead felt like coming home. On the 5th night, Wren finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. What happens if I do not want this? They were sitting in the library, surrounded by more books than Wren had known existed. Theron looked up from the document he had been reading, his golden eyes unreadable. What do you mean? The bond, the mate thing. She gestured vaguely between them. What if I do not want to be your queen, or your mate, or whatever it is I am supposed to be? What happens then? Theron set down his papers and gave her his full attention. Then you do not have to be any of those things. Just like that? Just like that. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Wren, I did not save you from one cage to trap you in another. If you want to leave, I will give you gold and safe passage to anywhere in the realm. If you want to stay but keep your distance from me, I will honor that. The bond does not give me ownership of you. It only tells me that you are the person my soul was made to find. Her throat tightened. And if I want to stay? If I want to know you better before I decide anything? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then I would be the happiest man in the kingdom. She found herself smiling back, the first genuine smile she had worn in longer than she could remember. They talked late into the night. Theron told her about his childhood, about growing up as the only son of a cold and distant father who saw him as an heir rather than a child. He told her about his mother, a gentle woman who had died when he was young, leaving him alone in a castle full of advisors who wanted to shape him into their image of a proper king. He told her about the loneliness of ruling, the weight of a crown that never lifted, the desperate hope that finding his mate would finally give him someone who saw him as more than a title. In return, Wren told him about her own life, about her mother, who had worked herself to death trying to keep them both fed, about the years after her mother's passing, surviving on scraps and charity and the occasional kindness of strangers, about the day the village council came to her door and told her she had been chosen for the moon rite, and how she had known in that moment that no one would fight for her. They were wrong, Theron said quietly. His hand found hers in the firelight, his fingers lacing through her own. You are worth fighting for, Ren. You always were. Tears pricked at her eyes. You do not know that. You do not know me. Then let me learn. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, feather-light and achingly gentle. Let me spend every day showing you what you are worth. And if, at the end of it, you still want to leave, I will let you go with my blessing. Ren looked at him, at the sincerity burning in his golden eyes, at the vulnerability he was offering her like a gift. No one had ever looked at her like that. No one had ever made her feel like she mattered. I will stay, she whispered, for now. Theron's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. For now is enough. She did not pull her hand from his grip, and when she finally retired to her chambers that night, she found herself touching her knuckles where his lips had been, her heart racing with something that felt dangerously like hope. 2 weeks passed, and Ren began to believe. It happened slowly, in small moments that accumulated like snowflakes forming a drift. The way Theron remembered that she preferred her tea with honey after she mentioned it once in passing. The way he walked on the outside of the path when they strolled through the gardens, placing himself between her and the world. The way his eyes lit up every time she entered a room, as if her presence was a gift he had not expected to receive. She learned the rhythm of his days, council meetings in the morning, training with his warriors in the afternoon, paperwork that stretched late into the evening. He was a busy man, a king with an entire realm depending on him, and yet he always made time for her. He carved out hours from his schedule like they were precious stones, refusing to let a single day pass without seeing her. You do not have to do this, she told him one afternoon. They were sitting in his private study, Ren curled in a window seat with a book, while Theron worked at his desk. I know you have responsibilities. I can entertain myself. You are not an entertainment. He set down his pen and turned to face her fully. You are my mate. My responsibilities include you now. I am not your responsibility. No. A smile played at his lips. You are my privilege. The words made her chest ache in ways she did not know how to name. That evening, Theron took her somewhere new. They climbed a winding staircase to the top of the castle's highest tower, emerging onto a balcony that overlooked the entire kingdom. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and the mountains in the distance glowed like they had been dipped in gold. This was my mother's favorite place, Theron said quietly. He stood beside her at the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. She would come here when the court became too much. She said the view reminded her that there was more to the world than politics and scheming. Ren looked at him, at the grief that still lingered in the lines of his face. You miss her. Every day. He was quiet for a moment. She was the only one who ever saw me as just Theron, not the prince, not the heir, not the future king, just her son. His jaw tightened. When she died, I lost the only person who loved me without wanting something in return. How old were you? 12. He turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his golden eyes made her breath catch. I have been alone ever since, surrounded by people who want my power, my influence, my favor, but none of them want me. Ren's heart clenched. She understood that loneliness. She had lived it her entire life, invisible and unwanted, surviving on the edges of a world that had no place for her. I do not want your power, she said softly. I do not even fully understand what being a mate means. But I know that when I am with you, I feel less alone than I have ever felt before. Theron's breath caught. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones with impossible tenderness. You undo me, he murmured. Every time I think I understand you, you say something that breaks my heart, and heals it at the same time. Is that a good thing? It is the best thing. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. I have waited 10 years for you, Ren. I would have waited 100 more. She felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever wanted her before. No one had ever looked at her like she was worth waiting for. Theron, she whispered. She did not know what she wanted to say. His name was the only word she could manage. He seemed to understand anyway. He always did. They stood there as the sun sank below the mountains, wrapped in the warmth of a connection neither of them fully understood. Ren leaned into him, letting herself believe just for a moment that this was real, that she could have this, that maybe, after all the years of loneliness and loss, she had finally found somewhere she belonged. She did not know that below them, in the shadows of the castle courtyard, a messenger was arriving with news that would shatter their fragile peace. The high priest had not forgotten his stolen sacrifice, and he was coming to take her back. The news arrived with the dawn. Ren was breaking her fast in her chambers when Theron appeared at her door, his face tight with controlled fury. She knew immediately that something was wrong. In all the weeks she had known him, she had never seen him look so close to losing control. What happened? She rose from her chair, her appetite forgotten. The high priest has petitioned the Council of Elders. Theron's voice was flat, dangerous. He claims I violated sacred law by interrupting the moon rite. He is demanding that you be returned to complete the sacrifice. The blood drained from Ren's face. Can he do that? He is trying. Theron crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his. The Council of Elders oversees religious matters across the realm. They have the authority to enforce traditional rites, even against the wishes of the crown. His grip tightened. But I will not let them take you. I swear it on my life. Theron, I will burn that council to the ground before I let them put you back on that altar. His golden eyes blazed with a ferocity that stole her breath. You are my mate, Ren, mine to protect, mine to cherish. No law in this realm or any other will change that. Her heart stuttered against her ribs. She had spent her whole life being told she was disposable, expendable, worth nothing more than the blood in her veins. And here was a king willing to go to war for her. You cannot start a war over me, she whispered. I am not worth— Do not! The word came out harsh, almost broken. Do not tell me you are not worth it. I have waited 10 years to find you. I have spent every moment since then falling deeper in love with you. If you think I would let some zealot with a blade take you from me, you do not know me at all. Ren stared at him, her mind catching on 3 words. You love me? Theron's expression softened. The fury drained from his face, replaced by something raw and vulnerable that made her want to weep. I have loved you since the moment I saw you on that altar, he said quietly. Standing there in your white gown, trembling but unbowed, refusing to speak the words they wanted you to say. I looked at you and I knew. I knew you were the one I had been searching for, the one my wolf had been calling to every night for a decade. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I do not know how to be loved. I do not know how to be worth anything to anyone. Then let me teach you. He released her hands and cupped her face instead, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Let me spend every day of the rest of our lives showing you what you mean to me. Theron. His name was a prayer on her lips, a surrender. He kissed her. His mouth was warm and firm against hers, gentle at first, as if asking permission. When she melted into him, her hands fisting in his tunic, the gentleness gave way to hunger. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like he had been waiting his entire life for this single moment. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against his chest until there was no space left between them. The bond between them roared to life, flooding her veins with golden light. Her wolf, dormant for so long she had almost forgotten it existed, howled with recognition and joy. This was what she had been missing. This was what she had been waiting for without knowing it. Him. Always him. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for breath, Theron rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said again. "I will fight the council. I will fight the high priest. I will fight every person in this realm who tries to take you from me." "You might have to." Her voice trembled, but not with fear, with something fiercer, something that felt like courage. "But you will not fight alone." His eyes widened. "Ren, I am done running. I am done being the girl that everyone throws away." She gripped the front of his tunic, pulling him closer. "If they want me, they will have to go through both of us." A smile broke across his face, fierce and proud and full of love. "That is my mate." He kissed her again, and the world outside could burn for all she cared. She had found her home. She had found her purpose. She had found her king. And she would not let anyone take him from her. Neither of them knew that the high priest was already within the castle walls, his followers spreading through the corridors like poison, preparing to strike before the sun set. The attack came during the evening meal. Ren was dining with Theron in his private chambers when the screams began. They echoed through the stone corridors, distant at first, then closer, accompanied by the clash of steel and the snarling of wolves. Theron was on his feet before Ren could even process what was happening, his body shifting into a protective stance in front of her. "Stay behind me," he commanded. The doors burst open. Men in black robes flooded into the chamber, their faces hidden behind masks painted with crescent moons. They moved with the fanatical fervor of true believers, their blades already stained with blood. At their head stood the high priest, his ancient face twisted with righteous fury. "You thought you could defy the gods and face no consequences," he hissed at Theron. "You thought your crown would protect you from divine retribution." "How did you get past my guards?" Theron's voice was deadly calm, but Ren could see the tension coiled in his muscles, ready to explode. "Some of your guards understand the old ways. Some of them know what happens when the moon rite is not completed." The high priest raised his ceremonial dagger, the same blade that had nearly taken Ren's life. "The crops have already begun to wither. Children have fallen ill. The people are afraid, and they know who to blame. The crops are withering because winter is coming. The children are sick because sickness spreads in cold weather." Theron's lip curled with contempt. "You are preying on fear and ignorance, the same way your kind always has. Believe what you wish. It changes nothing." The high priest's cold eyes found Ren, and she felt ice crawl down her spine. "The sacrifice must be completed. Give me the girl, and I will spare your life. Resist, and you will die alongside her. Touch her, and I will tear out your throat with my teeth." The high priest smiled. "So be it." He raised his hand, and his followers surged forward. Theron shifted mid-motion, his massive black wolf form erupting from his human skin with a roar that shook the walls. He tore into the attackers with savage efficiency, his jaws closing around limbs and throats, his claws rending flesh. But there were too many of them. For every robed figure that fell, two more took their place. Ren pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding with terror. She was useless like this, unable to shift, unable to fight, able only to watch as the man she loved was slowly overwhelmed. Blood sprayed across the stone floor. Theron stumbled, a blade catching his flank, then another slicing across his shoulder. He was going to die. He was going to die protecting her, and there was nothing she could do. No, she refused to accept that. Something stirred deep in her chest. Her wolf, dormant for 20 years, suddenly clawing to the surface with desperate urgency. Ren gasped as heat flooded through her veins, as her bones began to crack and shift in ways they never had before. The high priest saw her changing and lunged forward, his dagger aimed at her heart. Complete the rite. Kill her now before she... Ren shifted. The transformation was agony and ecstasy all at once, her body reshaping itself in a burst of silver light. When it was over, she stood on 4 legs, her fur the color of fresh snow, her eyes blazing with a power she had never known she possessed. She was smaller than Theron's wolf, but no less fierce. She threw herself at the high priest with a snarl that echoed through the chamber. Her teeth found his arm before he could bring the dagger down, crunching through bone with a satisfying crack. He screamed, dropping the blade, stumbling backward. His followers hesitated, their fanatical confidence wavering at the sight of the sacrifice they had come to claim, now standing before them as a beast of pure fury. Theron rallied beside her, his black wolf pressing against her white one. Together, they faced the remaining attackers, a united front of fang and claw. The battle turned. The robed figures began to fall back, their numbers dwindling, their resolve crumbling. The high priest clutched his ruined arm, his face contorted with pain and disbelief. This is impossible. You were never able to shift. You were weak, broken. Ren shifted back to human form, standing naked and blood-spattered and utterly unafraid. I was never broken, she said quietly. I was just waiting for something worth fighting for. The remaining attackers fled into the night, dragging their wounded priest with them. Ren swayed on her feet, the exhaustion of her first shift crashing over her like a wave. Theron caught her before she could fall, shifting back to wrap her in his arms. You shifted, he breathed against her hair. You magnificent, impossible woman. You shifted. I could not let them take you from me. She buried her face in his chest. Not when I just found you. His arms tightened around her, and she felt his heart pounding against her cheek. But they both knew this was not over. The high priest had escaped, and wounded animals were always the most dangerous. The message arrived 3 days later. Ren found it pinned to her chamber door with a bone needle, the parchment stained with something dark and rust-colored that she did not want to examine too closely. The words were written in a cramped, spidery hand that made her skin crawl. The village of Thornwood will burn at midnight unless the sacrifice is delivered to the sacred grove. Every death will be on your hands. Every child who screams as the flames consume them will cry your name with their final breath. You have until moonrise to decide what kind of person you truly are. Ren's hands trembled as she read the message again, then again, hoping the words would somehow change. Thornwood was a small village on the eastern border, home to farmers and shepherds who had nothing to do with the moon rite or the high priest's fanaticism. Innocent people who would die because of her. She should have told Theron immediately. She should have shown him the message and let him handle it. Let his guards ride out to protect the village. Let his power and authority solve the problem. That was what a queen would do. That was what a mate should do. But Ren had spent her entire life being told she was worthless, and some part of her, some broken piece that still believed those words, whispered that this was the truth she had been running from all along. She was not worth a kingdom. She was not worth innocent lives. She was just a girl who had been chosen to die, and maybe the kindest thing she could do was finally accept that fate. She left the castle at dusk. She did not say goodbye. She could not bear to see Theron's face, to watch him try to stop her, to hear him make promises he might not be able to keep. Instead, she left a letter on his pillow, the words blurred by the tears she could not stop. I am sorry. I cannot let innocent people die for me. Please do not follow. Please do not hate me. I love you. I will always love you. But some debts can only be paid in blood. The journey to the sacred grove took most of the night. Ren walked through the frozen forest alone, her white wolf form cutting through the darkness like a ghost. She had never felt so strong and so broken at the same time. Her wolf howled with grief, fighting against the direction she was taking them, but Ren pushed forward anyway. The high priest was waiting for her. He stood in the center of the grove, his arm bound in bloody bandages, his face gaunt with pain and triumph. Behind him, a dozen of his followers held torches that cast dancing shadows across the ancient stones. The altar where she had nearly died loomed at the edge of the clearing, freshly cleaned, waiting for new blood. I knew you would come. The high priest's smile was a terrible thing. Underneath all that defiance, you are still the same frightened girl who could not even speak the words of acceptance. Still desperate to prove you are worth something to someone. Ren shifted back to human form, standing naked and shivering in the cold. Release the village from your threat. That was the bargain. There was no threat. His smile widened. Thornwood was never in danger. I simply needed you to believe it was. He gestured to his followers, and they moved forward with chains. The Alpha King would have protected that village with his life. But you? You were always going to sacrifice yourself. It is what worthless things do. The chains closed around her wrists before she could react. They dragged her to the altar and forced her down, binding her to the cold stone the way they had before. The high priest approached with his ceremonial dagger, the blade freshly sharpened, gleaming in the torchlight. This time there will be no interruption, he said. This time the rite will be completed. Ren closed her eyes and thought of Theron, of his golden eyes and his gentle hands and the way he looked at her like she was precious. She thought of the life they could have had together, the love that had only just begun to bloom. She thought of all the moments they would never share, all the words they would never speak. I am sorry, she thought. I love you. I am so sorry. The high priest raised his blade, and somewhere in the distance, a howl shattered the night. Not one howl, dozens, hundreds. A chorus of wolves screaming through the darkness, getting closer with every heartbeat. The high priest's face went white. No, that is impossible. He could not have. The wolves burst from the trees like a flood of shadow and fury, and at their head ran a beast of pure midnight, his golden eyes blazing with a rage that could burn worlds. Theron had come for her, and he had brought an army. The sacred grove erupted into chaos. Wolves poured through the trees from every direction, their snarls filling the night with a symphony of fury. The high priest's followers scattered like leaves before a storm, their torches falling to the snow, their screams cutting short as fangs found flesh. It was not a battle. It was a reckoning. Theron did not slow as he reached the clearing. He shifted mid-stride, his human form emerging with blood already on his hands, and launched himself at the high priest with a roar that shook the ancient stones. The old man stumbled backward, raising his dagger in a desperate defense. You cannot stop the will of the gods. The rite must be completed. Your gods are dead. Theron caught the priest's wrist and twisted until the bone snapped. The dagger clattered to the ground. And soon you will join them. Ren struggled against her chains, her heart pounding with desperate hope. She could see Theron's warriors cutting through the remaining cultists with brutal efficiency. She could see the high priest crumpling beneath the weight of Theron's fury. It was over. It was finally over. Then she saw the shadow rising behind Theron. One of the cultists had survived, a young man with fanatical eyes and a blade clutched in his trembling hand. He lunged at Theron's unprotected back, the steel aimed at his heart. Theron! Ren screamed. He spun, but not fast enough. The blade was descending, mere inches from his flesh. Ren did not think. She simply acted. Her wolf erupted from her skin in a burst of silver light, shattering the chains that bound her to the altar. She launched herself across the clearing and slammed into the cultist before his blade could find its mark, her jaws closing around his throat with savage precision. They crashed to the ground together, and when Ren rose, the man did not. Silence fell over the grove. Wren stood trembling in her wolf form, blood dripping from her muzzle, her chest heaving with exertion. She had killed a man. She had killed him without hesitation, without mercy, because he had threatened her mate. She did not feel guilty. She felt powerful. Theron crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and fell to his knees before her. His hands cupped her wolf face, his golden eyes shining with tears. "You came back to me," he breathed. "You impossible, infuriating, magnificent woman. You came back." Wren shifted, her human form emerging naked and shaking. She collapsed into his arms, burying her face in his chest, sobbing with relief and exhaustion, and a love so overwhelming she could barely contain it. "I am sorry," she gasped. "I am so sorry. I thought I was protecting you. I thought—" "I know what you thought." His arms tightened around her, crushing her against him as if he would never let go. "I read your letter. I understood every word, even as they tore my heart to pieces." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his expression fierce. "But you were wrong, Wren. You are worth every life in this kingdom. You are worth every drop of blood I would spill to keep you safe." "The village was never in danger. My scouts confirmed it within an hour of your disappearance." His jaw tightened. "The priest played on your fears, on the wounds you carry. He used your kindness against you." Wren looked past him to where the high priest lay crumpled on the ground, his broken arm clutched to his chest, his face contorted with pain and hatred. "What will happen to him?" she asked. Theron rose to his feet, pulling her up with him. He wrapped his cloak around her shoulders, shielding her from the cold, then turned to face the man who had caused so much suffering. "For centuries you have used fear to control the innocent," Theron said, his voice carrying across the silent grove. "You have murdered girls in the name of gods who do not exist. You have torn families apart and called it sacred duty." He stepped closer, towering over the broken priest. "That ends tonight." "Kill me then," the high priest spat. "Make me a martyr. My followers will never stop. The old ways will never die." "I am not going to kill you." Theron smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I am going to let you live. I am going to strip you of your title, your authority, your followers. I am going to parade you through every village that ever gave you tribute and show them exactly what you are." He crouched down, bringing his face close to the priest's. "You will spend the rest of your miserable life watching everything you built crumble to dust, and when you finally die, alone and forgotten, no one will mourn you." He rose and turned his back on the broken man. "Take him," he commanded his warriors, and spread the word to every corner of the realm. "The moon rite is finished. Any village that continues the practice will answer to me." His wolves moved to obey, and Theron returned to Wren's side. He gathered her into his arms and held her close, his lips pressing against her hair. "Let us go home," he murmured. Wren clung to him, her heart finally beginning to slow. Home. She had never had one before, but wrapped in his arms, surrounded by his wolves, she finally understood what the word meant. The journey back to the castle passed in a blur of exhaustion and warmth. Theron carried her most of the way, refusing to let her walk despite her protests. His arms never wavered, his heart beating steady beneath her cheek, and Wren found herself drifting in and out of sleep as the miles fell away beneath them. Every time she stirred, his voice was there, murmuring reassurances she did not fully hear but somehow understood. When they finally reached the castle, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The entire household had gathered in the courtyard, their faces drawn with worry that melted into relief as Theron strode through the gates with his mate safe in his arms. He did not stop to address them. He carried Wren straight to his chambers and laid her gently on his bed, then climbed in beside her and gathered her close. Sleep, he murmured against her hair. We will talk when you are rested. She wanted to argue. She wanted to apologize again, to explain, to make him understand why she had done what she did. But her body had other plans. The moment her head touched the pillow, darkness claimed her. She slept for 2 days. When she finally woke, Theron was sitting beside the bed, watching her with an expression she could not read. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his golden eyes, his jaw shadowed with stubble. But he smiled when her eyes fluttered open, and that smile made everything else fade away. There you are, he said softly. I was beginning to worry you would sleep forever. Would you have let me? I would have stayed beside you for eternity if that was what you needed. Wren pushed herself upright, wincing at the ache in her muscles. Theron, I need to explain. You do not need to explain anything. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. I understand why you did what you did. I hate it, but I understand it. His jaw tightened. You spent your entire life being told you were worthless. One letter threatening innocent lives, and all those old wounds tore open again. Tears pricked at her eyes. I should have trusted you. I should have told you about the message. Yes, you should have. His voice was gentle despite the words. But I also should have done more to heal those wounds before they could be used against you. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. We both have things to learn. We will learn them together. Together, she echoed, the word feeling like a promise. Theron's expression shifted, something nervous flickering beneath the surface. It was such an unexpected look on his face that Wren felt her heart begin to race. There is something I need to ask you, he said. Something I have been waiting to ask since the moment I found you in that grove. He rose from the chair and knelt beside the bed, taking both of her hands in his. I have spent 10 years searching for you, he said quietly. 10 years of loneliness, of empty halls and colder beds, of wondering if I would ever find the one my soul was made to match. And then I walked into that clearing and saw you standing on the altar, and everything I had been missing suddenly made sense. Wren's breath caught. Theron. Let me finish. He squeezed her hands, his golden eyes blazing with emotion. You are the bravest person I have ever known. You walked into that grove alone, willing to die for people you had never met, because you could not bear the thought of innocent blood being spilled on your behalf. That is not worthlessness, Wren. That is the purest form of courage I have ever witnessed. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring. It was simple, but beautiful. A band of silver set with a stone that shimmered like moonlight, like the color of her wolf's fur. This belonged to my mother, he said. She told me to give it to the woman who completed my soul. His voice cracked. I have been carrying it for 10 years, waiting for you. Tears streamed down Wren's face. Are you asking me to marry you? I am asking you to be my queen, my partner, my mate in every way that matters. He pressed the ring into her palm, closing her fingers around it. But only if you want it, only if you choose it. I will never force you into anything, Wren. I only want you to know that my heart is yours, now and forever. She looked at the ring in her hand, at the man kneeling before her, at the future stretching out ahead of them. She thought about the girl she had been, standing on an altar waiting to die. She thought about the woman she had become, fierce and powerful and loved beyond measure. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Theron's face split into a smile so bright it rivaled the sun. He surged forward and kissed her, his hands cradling her face like she was the most precious thing in the world. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her love and hope and joy into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, he slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. I love you, He breathed against her lips. I love you too. She pressed her forehead to his. I think I have loved you since you wrapped your cloak around me in that clearing. Then we have wasted far too much time already. He grinned, boyish and radiant. Let us not waste any more. The wedding was held on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. It seemed fitting somehow. The moon rite had always been performed on this night, the blood of innocent girls spilled to appease gods that had never existed. Now, instead of death, there would be a celebration of life. Instead of sacrifice, there would be love. Wren walked down the aisle in a gown of silver and white, her hair crowned with winter roses that matched the ones she had worn on the altar where Theron had first found her. But this time, there were no chains binding her wrists. This time, she walked freely, her head held high, her eyes fixed on the man waiting for her at the end of the path. Theron looked at her like she was the moon itself, radiant and untouchable and utterly his. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. They spoke vows written in their own words, promises of love and protection and partnership that would last until the stars burned out. When Theron slid the wedding band onto her finger, his hands trembled with emotion. When she did the same for him, her eyes shone with tears she did not bother to hide. I crown you Queen of the Northern Realm, the officiant announced. May your reign be long and your bond eternal. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Wren barely heard them. All she could see was Theron, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her toes curl. My queen, he murmured against her lips. My king, she replied. The months that followed were the happiest of Wren's life. She threw herself into her new role with a determination that surprised everyone, including herself. She visited the villages that had once practiced the moon rite, meeting with the families who had lost daughters, helping them heal from generations of trauma. She established shelters for the orphans and the forgotten, the girls like her who had no one to fight for them. She became a voice for the voiceless, and the people loved her for it. And through it all, Theron was beside her, supporting her, loving her, showing her every single day that she was worth more than she had ever believed possible. It was on the first anniversary of their meeting that Wren finally shared her secret. They were standing on the balcony of his mother's tower, watching the full moon rise over the mountains. The same moon that had once demanded her blood now seemed to bless them with its silver light. I have something to tell you, she said softly. Theron turned to her, concern flickering in his golden eyes. What is it? She took his hand and pressed it against her stomach, still flat but harboring a miracle she had scarcely dared to believe. We are going to have a pup. The words hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then Theron's face transformed, shock giving way to wonder, wonder giving way to a joy so profound it brought tears streaming down his cheeks. A pup, he breathed. Our pup. Our pup, she confirmed, laughing through her own tears. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, his laughter ringing through the night like music. When he set her down, he dropped to his knees and pressed his lips to her stomach, murmuring words of love and promise to the child growing inside her. Later, they shifted and ran together beneath the full moon, two wolves racing through the forest where their story had begun. Wren's white fur gleamed silver in the moonlight, and Theron's black form moved beside her like a shadow, protective and eternal. She had been chosen as a sacrifice, a worthless girl meant to die on a blood-soaked altar. Instead, she had become a queen, a mate, a mother. She had found her king in the darkness, and together they had built a kingdom of light. And as the moon blessed them from above, Wren finally understood the truth she had been running from her entire life. She had never been worthless. She had simply been waiting to be found.